Hello everyone, I am Chris Gazdick, a mental health and substance abuse therapist, mentioning that I have the book out, roaming around the world I guess, in bookstores and online medium, Rediscovering Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self. So we all welcome you to Through a Therapist's Eyes, the podcast where you get personal insights directly from a therapist in your own home or personal time in your car. We have a guest co-host system. If you've been following the show recently, you may have missed that Craig Graves is kind of checking into his own coaching stuff, and we have made a transition to have different month. We have different guest co-hosts, and this month, Adam, we still got you hanging out with us, right?
Yep, I'm back.
You're going to hang out for a few more weeks, and then we transition to another one, and you'll be back later on in the year.
Yep.
All right. So we welcome you to see the world through the lens of a therapist, but be aware it's not delivery of therapy services in any way. Contact us for questions. We're going to, in our revamping here, we're kind of trying to make a little bit more of a highlight that we want your contact. And there's an easy way to do that. They can remember this, man. Contact us at contact@throughatherapist's.com. Brilliant, right, Adam?
Hopefully they won't be trying to find contacts like for their eyes.
That would be bad.
That'd be bad. Yeah,
that would be bad. Different kind of contacts.
Yes.
All right. Contact us for questions. I'm going to say even on our personal or our social media sites and all the places where you'll find us, 100% will be answered in some way, shape, or form by me directly, honestly. So we do have the private email, contact@throughatherapist'seyes.com, and the other various social media outlets. Finally, check us out, the website, throughatherapist'seyes.com, where you can get full show transcriptions, all the links and articles we use for show prep and all that. Got a lot of the books. I don't know where we're at, Neil, with the books on the website. We got him mic'd up for these little short interludes, too, this time. We're getting smarter. So how are we doing with the book links?
Well, the books are on every show.
Yep.
I just didn't consolidate them all yet because that was a pretty long list. So.
Yes, it is. It really is.
So, but we are going to be doing some YouTube playlists, too, because we have all these topics. And to make it easier for people and with all these work from home, we're going to create some special YouTube playlist. So you can just turn YouTube on in the background while you're working from home and just listen to all the marriage topics or all the parenting. Or all
cool.
the different. So that's my next goal for us, to make it easier for people to digest this. It's 150 episodes almost. We want it to where people can get the episodes they want.
Not to mention, we've been talking about it for the last couple years, several months for sure. We're getting the videos thing going together. Stay tuned for that. We're serious about getting on YouTube as well, kind of, so you can see us chat just as much as listen to us chat. That's exciting, and that'll be kind of cool. And some other special cool things on the YouTube thing that we're working out as we go along. Anyway, let's start out tonight with the current event. And Neil, I was definitely wanting to get your view on this. I wonder if you saw the current event that we've talked about recently a few times. Did you see the update on Facebook?
I did.
You did?
Facebook came back with a date for Trump to get back online.
Yes.
2 years.
Yes.
I think it's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's going to, whatever the incitement or whatever that they banned him for, that's going to let a lot of stuff die down. It's going to give him time. If he does decide to run again, he can start building that back up, and hopefully he'll learn from his past mistakes and he'll learn to control himself or get a better social media person to control him going forward. But yeah, they came back with a number. They were told to, and they did. And I was surprised how fast they did.
And I was surprised that they did that pretty quickly too. And the thing that I'm focused on, not to get political with this issue, but from a mental health perspective, I really want to highlight the idea that in the world and the way that we live, we have so much social media stuff, and we've talked about that on our show, Neil, as you know, in the past with Craig, and the main impact is like anxiety. This whole thing creates massive anxieties of the unknown and comparison to others. The whole word, have you ever heard, Adam, of FOMO? You ever hear what that's called? We got a term for it now.
No.
A type of anxiety almost. Not clinical type, but fear of missing out, right? So there's a lot of impact on our mental health.
Is that like you got to check Facebook?
Yeah, you fear missing out on
Yeah.
Snapchat. All of my friends are doing this or that or whatever. And there's another big type of fear of control that we have, that there's so much data coming at us. And the natural question is, who is controlling that? And so part of the reason why, I think this is the third time we brought this up in a current event way, where Facebook and Trump are heading off, not to get political with it, but to realize, like, there is tapping into a major fear that we have about control of our media, control of our information, control of our lives. And I'm looking forward, your political stance notwithstanding, to when we have more gatekeeping going on, because it's been the wild, wild west, and people are not handling that well at all. Just because we mentally and psychologically feel like there's no control out there, and
Yeah.
damn if there isn't.
Yeah, I think there'll just be another brother system. You have somebody else just saying, "Oh, that's acceptable. This is not," and they'll have a new set of rules, and then you have I think it's going to be an ongoing thing forever.
Maybe sort of. It's very much developing is the main point here, and the way that Facebook has gone about this, for better or worse, I feel like it's the first real attempt, at having some sort of gatekeeping going on, and I see that very much as a good thing. Because otherwise, there's a lot of fear out there,
Right.
in the sense that there is no gatekeeping, right? Does that make sense to you? What'd you take from that, Neil? And then we'll launch into what we're going to talk about tonight with aging parents.
I think a lot of the stuff with social media, it's people are realizing how much they're exposing themselves to on top of that. Because Apple's actually doing something else with their devices and their pieces where it talks about privacy. So
I've saw that on the news.
You talk
too,
about
yeah.
control and dealing with email marketers and stuff. The Apple on the iPhone, if you use Apple Mail, they're not going to give you the tracking that a lot of these marketing people want. So this is just another piece of these social media platforms, these devices, these large tech companies are now they're dealing with the repercussions of, hey, we did collect all this data that you have no control over. Now we're trying to circle back and realize you can trust us again. And there's, like you said, that anxiety, that trust. Oh, no, I gave them all this information. There's all these things that are going on that social media has led to over the last 20 years. So it's a big change.
Right. Absolutely. Grab a pen over there for me if you would, I need. And Adam, so let's launch into this, right? So how to cope with aging parents, okay? We had a cool show, I think, last night that is a little bit of an original idea for me in bringing out what I call the lost decade. And in that idea, it's really kind of looking a lot at, what are the long-term, the life cycle implications of, how a family functions and copes. And I was just getting to think, like, what do we want to transition to today? And this is an issue that we haven't really talked a lot about insofar as aging parents goes. But I got to thinking, let's look at the stress line of, having a kid, realizing, if you will, like we talked about last week in the lost decade, that this isn't going away. And then you had this long swath of time, like a decade or so, maybe longer for women, we talked about last week. But then what happens at the end of that? You kind of tag right into a whole nother area of, from the lost decade, sort of coming out of the lost decade, you re-find yourself, and then you start realizing, holy crap, myself as a kid is dealing with these parents that are starting to struggle and age in very real ways. And I think you just kind of move into that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
And I know, just looking at that, I mean, my kids came out of it. It's been 5-6 years or so since we've kind of moved through that, and I'm very much looking around at my parents, and I'm like, yo, y'all are getting older.
Yes.
It's scary.
It is.
I think if you look at the life cycle, part of what we'll talk about in this idea of dealing with aging parents is the mortality of yourself, but then also the stress of how your family's moving around and, what that means and how all that functions. So you move right out of out of the frying pan and into the skillet, I guess.
Yes.
You'd say, right? Or out of the boiling. What is that phrase? I screwed it up.
The thing.
The thing, that.
Yeah.
What's the expression?
Out of the frying pan into the fire.
There you go.
There he goes.
Thanks, sir. So that's just where I kind of thought we were spinning out from with that and moving into this topic. Let me just throw it over to you, Adam, insofar as when you think about dealing with aging parents, that whole realm, that whole world, like, what comes to your mind when you start thinking about this? Is there an emotion that comes to mind?
Oh, yes.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah,
Are there factors or questions that come to mind?
Yes, and Chris knows my family situations, but you start thinking about, well, how am I going to provide for my parent? How's the transition to like assisted living going to go? What's their housing situation going to be like? Their will and, executor estate. And then you also have issues with maybe there's mental issues with the the one or both of the parents, then that's a whole nother gambit of things.
Right.
So, yeah, that's the kind of things I think of.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And, honestly, just listening to you there, I'm kind of like, wow, how's that speak to the fear of the unknown? I mean, you just rattled off like 5 or 6 different things there with great questions about like, well, so how is that going to work out? How is this going to work out? What happens if this occurs? What do we do in that situation? I mean, that's a lot to be worried, keyword worried about, right? I mean,
Part of the reason I have gray hair.
I thought that was all the kids. That is all kids.
That's why I said part of the reason.
Yes, gotcha. Yeah, I just think that, this is a great topic for most people in their midlife. If you're not up against it, you're kind of starting to realize you dang well will be soon, because you used to rely on your parents for a lot more, that now they're relying on you, and there's like this major shift that, that turns on you really quickly.
We call this the middle decades.
Is that?
I'm just saying, I don't know.
He's coining a term. I think that's awesome. The middle decades.
The parents will be the last decade.
The lost decade, moving to the middle decades, back to the last decade.
Yeah, that might sound morbid, but yeah. I mean, anyway.
It does a little bit, actually. Does a little bit, actually. So let's fire off into this a little bit, and right off the get-go, I'm going to point out the idea of, the order of priority that we've talked about a lot of times needs to be front and center. God, if religion's in your life, God's first and top of the priority. Then self, then your spouse, then your kids, and then family, and then friends, and then work. And all of that moves around all the time, but that's still... in this circumstance, when you're dealing with aging parents, that actually still needs to be in that line. But that's tough, right? Because if you think about that, where's your parents at in that order of priority? Aren't they supposed to, because of their needs, jump up to priority number one?
You would think, but you can't always do that. I mean, same time, you got a house payment to make. So,
Right.
And you got to take care of your immediate family.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know it's immediate family, your family that lives with you.
It's an interesting therapy question I ask sometimes, Adam.
Yeah.
Talk about what do people see in my therapy office when I'm dealing with family issues. Incidentally, you just took us on a little bunny trail, but that's cool.
That's my job.
Right. Who is in your immediate family and who is in your extended family? And furthermore, who do you think your spouse is going to have in her extended family versus her immediate family? Because that it layers out a lot of different boundaries in a system.
Okay.
Right? Because it's not really defined. I know what my immediate family means to me, but I actually found out at some point my wife sees that a little differently. Right? And that's where, if you don't realize those differences are there, leads to different.
So do you count people outside of your house?
I generally go with my 2 kids and my wife.
Okay.
And I. That's the way I land on it.
Right.
But people definitely include their parents in on that. Sometimes there are people's immediate family, you'd be surprised, but it's like cousins they're really close with. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that, what members of your family are in that.
Now, I think you have to count your family that lives with you.
Right. Well, that's
and then even to extend that, your kids, even after they move out for a little while.
Right. How about your daughter-in-law? Does that become part of your immediate family?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
There's different things that move around, so it's a real interesting question to get at family boundaries. But we do digress. I'm just curious to think as we're going through this first little segment is think of these things as we go through this show, right? At what stage of life are you coming across this issue of dealing with older, aging parents? The life cycle, the lost decade. Think of the order of priorities and how that moves around for you and what you're going to do with that. And then, how do our emotional selves really, what are we experiencing with this process? Because this is a major, slow changing reality. Sometimes it's a quick changing reality. Somebody may have a stroke and boom, immediately they're popped into a different state.
Right.
But a lot of times this is a slow developing, a slow cooking reality. I'll tell you one that, for instance, with me, I mean, I love my father-in-law, Gerald, if you ever hear this, much respect for the guy, mad respect for him. He's a hard worker. I mean, he will work circles around all 3 of us in this room. But it really began to trip me out when I saw him walking down our stayers. He stayed at our house and stuff. And I'm like, dude's really using that handrail. You know, like it's how do you experience looking at something like that? Now, I've known this man for, pretty much 3 decades almost.
Right.
And he's the worker guy. And for him to do that just sort of struck me as like, wow, life's changing here. And it
happened quick too.
It bothered me. It does. It bothered me.
Okay.
So what are you experiencing as you're going through these different changes and these different observations? Think of those kind of 3 things as we go through this show. I would invite the audience. What life cycle, how does that interact with other very perplexing and dominating things like the lost decade? Where's your order of priorities in your life, including yourself and the standard healthy order? And then really just checking in with what are you experiencing emotionally as we go through all of this. Okay. So let's move through to a different segment and look at caretaking, a caretaking role. I always think of early on in my career when I went to this conference. I didn't know much about anything, and I went to this conference, and it was all about elder care, I guess. And part of it was because I had to get some supervision hours to get admitted into school. Not supervision hours, but volunteer hours.
Okay.
You get admitted into social work school. And, they really helped me understand about a whole different population of people and what the caretaking role is, because it was like one of the first professional conferences I went to.
You're referring just to like medical caretaking.
It was kind of a medical-driven arena, because it wasn't like there were a lot of nurses at this conference. But that's what's the interesting part is it actually didn't focus on the medical, because the caretaking role, which, let's be clear, is the son or the daughter or the family member or a professional person, right? That are the caretaker,
right?
Their role in helping the aging person, right?
For whatever it might be,
whatever it might be, right? You have professional caretakers in nursing homes. I mean, that's what they are. So, what do you think? What do you know? What do you imagine about the caretaking role? Because it's a dynamic part of this conversation.
Well, for me, caretaking is like anything they may need. I mean, for example, they may need their grass cut. They may need transportation to a doctor appointment. They may need assistance on taking their medication.
Right. Medication moves into something called activities of daily living.
Mm-hmm.
Those that work with the elderly and whatnot are very much talking about ADLs. And that can get real involved. What do you think are all involved in ADLs?
No idea.
Toiletry. Cooking.
Okay.
Cleaning. Like, all of the things that we begin to take for granted, these things are no longer in their realm of, like, just take it for granted that they do them.
Clothes being washed.
Yeah.
Heat.
Yeah.
Heat being on.
Right. Bills being paid.
Mm-hmm.
These activities of daily living are a big part of more involved levels of caretaking. And people do not think about those things. They see their parents as like, what do you mean I got to help them with bathing? Like, whoa, how do I do that? Right? So there's a lot of things that go into, you were in like the pre.
Yeah, and that's something else that you got to think about. Sometimes the parent doesn't want the help.
And we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, because the big thing behind that, dude, can you even imagine? I have a hard time imagining this because I'm, what am I, 48 years old, midlife, if you will. Can't imagine not being able to take care of my own toiletry.
Yeah.
I mean, I need help to do a shower. Like, I want to cook my own steak. Like, what do you... But suddenly it becomes difficult to go grocery shopping and get all the stuff you need.
Right.
And that's, talk about humbling and life humbling your ass, man. You can't function on a very basic level. How are you going to feel about that?
Be rough.
Terrifying.
I know my mom, for a while, she had lost her driver's license.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, she lost her driver's license. She got it back, but she was having some eye issues. And until she got it worked out, she couldn't drive.
Yeah.
And, she lives by herself. She's 81. And she couldn't drive.
You lose. Talk about grief and loss.
Mm-hmm.
When you see a very angry older person, a lot of times that's because they're dealing with incredible losses of a very private nature as well. So that loss, that grief, that is what they're experiencing a lot. And it's not that they maybe don't even want help. They recognize, like, I don't want to need help. This is crazy.
I can understand that.
It's terrifying.
I mean, even at work or whatever, it's kind of aggravating when you can't do something that you're are used to doing, or you're proficient in one thing. All of a sudden, you get thrown into something else, and you're like, "Well, I can do anything. Why can't I do this?"
Imagine how helpless you feel.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what you're seeing with, a lot of times. And it's funny, doing the show prep, I saw a lot of articles. It was frustrating a little bit because I was doing my brainstorm and thinking about all this and developing my own list of things and process of, how do we deal with this issue? Well, it's oh my God. We'll talk about it, I guess, in a little bit. But this phrase, I got my parent, that drives me crazy. Like, these are not kids. These are not, they regress.
Mm-hmm.
But they're your freaking parents. They're adults.
Right.
Anyway, I'll get off of that because we'll get back on it. But, let's think about the caretaking role, and I've described it a little bit. There are some things that I like to point out about it that I really learned from that conference very, very early on in my career. How about it's really okay to not want to do that, right? That's something that people struggle about. You've shared, my mom's beginning to struggle. I don't know that she'll ever listen to this, but I'm anxious and feel weird mentioning that. But she's really losing a lot of her memory, like dramatically. And so I don't even want to deal with it. I don't want to mention it. It's kind of like,
there's things I don't want to deal with either.
Yeah. And but you're supposed to.
Right.
Aren't you?
You're supposed to, and you have to.
Don't you have to?
You have to.
You have to be in a caretaking role.
You have to.
And I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Does that sound crazy?
To a certain extent, yeah. I mean, because there's things that I feel like I have to do because if I don't do it, it's not going to get done.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's lots of life circumstances, with siblings and what kind of care is needed and this type of thing. I think I am mentioning this more in the context of the more involved activities of daily living, needs. I want to give people permission to make a decision. This is something that I'm open to being involved in because being in a caretaking role and having a relationship like that, giving back to your parent, being there for them, loyal, it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I can't tell you, I've heard, we heard Casey. Remember Neil Casey was talking about that when she was on our show. She spent her, how long was it? Like 5, 6, 7 years, like as the sole caretaker for, was it her mom or her dad?
I thought it was her grandfather. Right
Yeah,
after
you're
high
right.
school, it was her grandfather.
Yeah, of course you're right. It wasn't her parents. And so, that was wonderful. She moved in and she did all these things, and that was a big part of her life, and it was her giving back to her family. And so that was really, it's a blessing to be able to be in that role. But it's also reasonable to not want to do that. I will tell you very clearly, I already am clear. I do not want this role with my mom. It's not something that I want to do.
I can see that it's okay to not be the sole caretaker,
right?
And when I say that, I don't mean just the only person, but not be responsible for taking care of every single thing, because, like you mentioned before, and I think you're going to go into it a little later on about some parents may not want you to be involved in certain things.
Exactly.
I mean, there's things that I feel like need to be done, but she doesn't want done, so I stay out of it.
And that's a perfect little segue to a component. I want to give people permission it's okay to not want to be an involved caretaking role, living with a parent and whatnot. It's also okay for them not to want to do it as long as it's safe. This has to be kind of...
What do you mean?
Well, okay, so somebody who's dementia, it's not safe for them to be, living alone and just being left alone. I mean, they'll be trying to walk to Texas to see their cousin. They're not making safe decisions.
Okay.
So we're not ever talking about safety here. We're talking about have discussions about expectations and what you can provide, what you're willing to provide, what they need, and move into this graciously with boundary creating conversations. How about that for a phrase? That's a takeaway. Like, boundary creating conversations when dealing with your aging parents is really, really important. And we can move with freedom in the creation of those boundaries. That people don't realize that. Don't get me wrong. Somebody in my family needs something that I can provide. I am there 100%. No doubt about it. I'll go to, hell and earth to help you if I can.
I can't wait for you to meet my mom now.
I have not met her. I said if I can. If I can.
No, I didn't mean to help, but just if you have a conversation with her, so you'll be like,
yeah.
Just so you can relate to me, you'll be like, oh man, Adam.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yep.
It's a lot when you're dealing with some of those emotions. In the caretaking role, let's talk about the dangers thereof too, right? Because we have a lot to cover. The dangers of being in this. I'm just going to simplify this and say, honestly, back to that order of priority again. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to burn out. This is an incredibly draining reality to deal with. So burnout is something you really have to be paying attention to. And then we talked a little bit, dealing with the resistance from the parent, and then, the sensitivities to the emotional distress that they're having. I mean, this is a major loss of independence in their life. They are tripping out by what they're not able to, to deal with. So, like, in short, like, how do you deal with this? Like, with honor and respect. And taking care of them, being aware of their mental health, and being aware of your mental health. How's that for, how do you deal with all the caretaking role, right? A lot there.
Medication.
We talked about keg stands last week, right? Keg stands.
Yes.
Lots of keg stands. For all you who don't know, that's when you stand upside down, put a tap to your mouth, and drink as much beer as possible. I did it like once in college. It's not a fun time. Not a fun time at all. Okay, so let's move on to another section here. I thought this was really cool. It was one of the articles that I found coming into show prep. How do you suppose our society deals with the issue? We're in America here, so the Western culture, if you will. How do we generally deal with the aura of dealing with aging parents? The issues all told, the culture that we have towards the elderly.
Tell me more about what you mean.
Does our attitude towards the elderly folks suck, or is it great?
I would think that, everybody tries to make it sound like it's great, but it's kind of hard for it to be great when you have some of the issues you just talked about, when the parent doesn't want you to do things, or that you don't want to do something.
Let me circle back around this, and I'm going to see it. You'll see exactly what I mean.
Okay.
And I'll see what you think, because I'm going to maintain, and this article was pretty cool, and I'm just going to fly through it with how they pointed out other cultures, if you will, right? So there's a big reframe that's done in other cultures. So here's some of the cultural statements. They're sort of main bullet points. Old man is not a bad word in the Greek culture. Okay? Native American elders passed down their knowledge. In Korea, elders are highly respected. Chinese children tend to care for their parents in old age. In India, elders are considered to be the head of the family. In African, God, I need a drink of water. Excuse me. In African American communities, when death occurs, they're seen as an opportunity to celebrate life. And in ancient Rome, elders were really thought of as a precious resource. So I circle back. How do you suppose our culture tends to deal with the issue of the elderly?
It's going to be hard to say because we have all those in America.
There's a blending pot.
Yep.
For sure. I think, honestly, I'm going to make the bold statement that our society really sucks in honoring the beauty and the wisdom of aging gracefully. Even that phrase, right, in our vernacular, aging gracefully. What does that mean? Isn't it already a respectful position to have the experience that you have in life?
Should be.
we have views like the dirty old man, and all the age jokes we make. Oh, you're old, man. Look at it. You got white hair. You're old. You're nothing but a crotchety, stressed out old person, man. Crotchety. Isn't that a good word?
It is.
Right? I do not think that we have a very good honoring position in life for the elderly. They are forgotten a lot of times. They're dismissed a lot of times. They're not respected in a lot of ways. They're washed up, old, not useful, and therefore not really needed.
I would think technology is not helping either.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, they have trouble relating different. Like it's
using it and knowing how to go. And
for example, my mom, she's never had a computer or a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
So can you imagine her having a conversation with, say, my daughter about Snapchat,
right,
or Instagram, when she has no idea what it's about?
Right.
So
and they get left behind.
Yeah,
they're left out.
Mm-hmm.
Their views aren't valued. I am concerned about how we make the aging process a shameful process. We shame people when they start losing their abilities on a physical level, and inadvertently throw a lot of disrespect out there about a massive amount of our population. And I'm not going to compare cultures per se. I guess I am a little bit. And I'm not a cultural expert, by the way, either. But I think that there are a lot of other cultures that very much have a very different fundamental subconscious. A lot of this is subconscious. Some people might be listening to me now thinking, oh, Chris, you're full. I don't get that. I don't get that at all, man. My mom is the matriarch. That's what they do. That's how they operate. Well, but a lot of times they're just not. I don't know. Is this making any sense?
Yeah, it's going to vary from family to family, and too, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not only how the whole family was brought up, and how the parent is, how the kid is, and everything else.
Think about it in the women's world, and not just in the women's world. Men do it too. We're like, just for men. Let's get our hair cut. Let's look young. Let's get our facelifts. Let's age as gracefully as we can. Let's prevent the way that we look and all of that. I mean, I remember there was a lady in our life that helped my mom, get through this adjustment and stop coloring her hair. Like, that was a big deal. It's a huge deal for a woman.
You're talking about the older women that still have like jet black hair?
Yeah.
Where it gets to the point where they're, it kind of looks weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of just like, no, you know what? It's okay. This is not only is this okay, it's like, dude, you're moving into the place of honor. Like, you're at the end or stage of life where we're relying on your guidance and your wisdom. Like I've read a little bit about the Native American population. I mean, dude, that's the chief. He makes the call.
Mm-hmm.
All you young people don't know nothing. Go to him. He's the one that knows. Right? There's a very different culture that I think we lose when we're dealing with aging parents, and that's a part of our emotion when we're coping with these realities in our family life, whether you're realizing or not. So I might be pointing out to you to examine and just look inside yourself a little bit and see, like, how does this operate in your own sphere, in your own experience? Is there really a value there, or is there a loss and a regret and shame and a kicking on the side? They're still a part of your family. They're still they know all the things that they used to know. In fact, a whole lot more, because they're always picking up more.
Or they may be forgetting a lot of things.
In the case of my mom, but that's also just forgetting some of the daily stuff. Like, we had this conversation 3 times, Mom. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when it comes to, what do you think about, this issue in life, Mom, when we talk about religion and, love and how to love somebody? Well, she's got all that. She just doesn't care what she ate for dinner and, forgets. Right? So I just want to challenge us to begin thinking about how do we go about this? How do we go and manage, this new movement when people are beginning to get older? And then let's talk about kind of how do we cope with it? Okay. So how we doing so far, man? What are you thinking, Adam, about, the different ins and outs of managing this whole population and questions that might be going through your mind? Like, are we, the caretaking role, is it okay to be in it? Is it not? What is the stage of life? Like, how do we cope is where we're going next. But how are we doing? What do you think people are hearing?
Well, I would think that they're thinking that it's okay to be a caretaker, but it's also okay to not be a caretaker. You have to kind of pick and choose your battles. You have to
That's a good phrase.
You got to decide what you can and what you can't help out with, and there's all kinds of variables on that, like everything from them not wanting your help or you not being able to help. So,
giving yourself, you were just saying that, it occurs to me, there's another component of giving yourself some grace for what you might not be able to do. Here's the Serenity Prayer again, right? The serenity to accept the things I cannot change. We suck at that. Being mindful and accepting of, what our limitations really are. I can't do this. And, I don't have the finances maybe. And that's another big factor, finances with all this. I don't have the ability. I live far away. We're also spread out. Does that mean I got to move?
I can't convince them.
Right?
That needs to be done this way.
They're not hearing me. Lots of different. So give yourself some grace as well. With some of that comes to mind, which is probably moving into like, how do we cope? Okay, so what do we do? This is a stressful time, a lot of change. It's kind of scary. You're 6 or 7 different things of unknown outcomes when we started. How do we cope? How do we deal with this? What says you? What do you think?
Do your best.
Okay.
That's always a good thing. Always do your best.
Simple and to the point.
Yep.
I want to avoid the idea of thinking, oh, well, you're going to parent your parents. But one of the things I say for parenting, is very much like, I do believe that parents are doing the best that they can, for their kids and
for their parent.
And with what they have to offer. That's what I say for a parent working with their kids. And you're right, it just occurred to me, that goes that way too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're doing the best that you can, probably so, in managing this relationship and these needs that your parents have. So if you're doing that, you're okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about have some fun with it?
Okay.
Can stressful things be fun?
I'm trying to think of how.
Right? I mean, we don't necessarily need to fall back into the disrespectful jokes of age and age sucks and that type of thing. I just kind of highlighted be careful about that. But, dude, this is a fun time. Grandparents are amazing. How much fun do you think grandparents have with your kids? And kids, you ever see how they gravitate towards grandparents?
I have seen that, yes.
Right? They just love hanging out with mama and papa and making the cookies. And, your kids have time. Your grandparents have time. So there's a lot of fun to be had with all of this.
And that's not always the case, though, in some families.
There are a lot of factors that are different. And also particularly when they get much more older. But what do you mean? Go ahead with what you mean.
Well, my mom is not that close with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
There's long story of things that happened in the past that's kind of made that like that. So they're not close at all. So it's a little bit different than what you were just saying in my particular case.
Yeah, I guess so. And it reminds me, we were talking about the lost decade, right? They want to choose what kind of relationship they have with their their grandkids and how they're very involved or less involved or kind of where those boundaries lie. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But are you talking about like even animosity that gets developed and disconnect? Or
Yeah, they're disconnected. They haven't been around each other much and for different reasons. But I've seen it the other way around too. I've seen other families where the grandparent and the grandkid are like, always together, always doing stuff and always going to ball game and, just whatever. Always doing something, always going to eat dinner or going, just hanging out or watching TV, just always something. But then there's also other cases where some families there's just not a connection at all.
And I think that there's probably a big factor there with, we've moved around so much, right? I mean, one lives in Chicago, we're down in Florida, and this other person's over in Idaho. It's like, or just simply put, hey, I moved out west and created a whole new family, and my parents are back east, and we're pretty spread out. So
I haven't seen you in 30 years.
Literally, yeah. I could see where some of that kind of starts to play out. It occurred to me. So coping. How do we cope? Let's see. Interesting concept of transference. I started out here. It's interesting that I started out here. So this is okay. Remember when I said, as we're meandering through this conversation, think of those things at the top, right? What life stage you're in, the order of priority and how that moves around. And then your experience, right? Your experience in dealing with the aging parents. What's that like? So a weird concept, a whole psychological, like Psych 101 concept, I think comes in here called, I was going to say transference, right? What is transference, says you? Do you have any idea? Remember
No clue.
Psych 101?
No clue.
Don't remember at all?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So check this out then. I'd be curious what you hear with this, Adam. Redirection of a substitute, usually a therapist, of emotions that were originally felt in childhood. Okay? So it's really a complicated emotional dynamic. And usually we're kind of talking about like, when you have experiences from childhood and then I'm experiencing this with you, this conversation, and subconsciously stuff triggers off in me, and I'm supposed to say this or I'm supposed to do that, and I transfer onto you like, hey, you sound like my brother right now. You're annoying the crap out of me. I don't know why, and then if you look at transference, I've transferred my experience with my brother, and I'm actually sort of projecting it and placing it on you.
Like bad relationships.
Very much like bad relationships. Well, think about this. Does that make better sense now?
Yeah.
Is? Okay. Well, what happens when you're actually transferring your experience in a weird sort of way on fundamental people in your life that were actually the source of the transference, but aren't that now?
So you're saying the person's changed?
Your parents right now are very, very different people than they were when you were a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Very, very different. They've had 40 years of changed experiences.
Yes.
And, all sorts of different realities have been in their life since then. But if you're now dealing with them and you're transferring all these experiences that you had actually onto them, isn't that sort of psychedelic weird? Right?
It's kind of like a kind of forgive them thing, sort of.
A lot there. Go with that. What you mean? There's a lot of that.
Well, I mean, if a parent did something that's, scarred a kid and it's been 30 years, they're trying to think how to...
Resentments that you may have been holding and didn't even know come out. Hurts that you've been harboring and didn't even really realize it. Suddenly, when you're very much closer and dealing with them a lot more because they need to be around you,
I think it'd be kind of...
suddenly bubble up.
I think it'd kind of be difficult to even realize you're doing that, though.
Exactly. It's very, very difficult to even realize that you're doing that. And so I'm pointing out, like, what is your experience with that? So when you see a lot of energy in yourself for some reason, check that out. Just meditate on it a little bit. Think about it.
You mean like if somebody's feeling a certain way, you're like, why am I thinking that?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're literally dealing with the same person that might be pretty formative in the way that you've experienced that type of emotion. Because it was actually them. I mean, I feel like we could do a psychedelic movie with this or something.
Maybe you should ask the parent.
Yeah? Go ahead. What do you mean?
So, say something like, I have this friend he's feeling kind of this way about a certain situation with his parent. What do you think?
Yeah. Actually, you know what I'm thinking about as you say that, Adam? I'm kind of maybe thinking about even a more of a direct approach. This might be, and I didn't think about this in my brainstorm, but you're bringing up something that's cool. Call yourself out.
Call myself out.
Call yourself out.
Okay.
Right? This is an interesting opportunity in a relationship that becomes much more involved, right? Where, you're dealing with the emotions that you have and the needs that are there by your parent. This might be a really cool time to work through very directly with them some of the things that you've never really talked about. And I'm not saying bring up a bunch of new problems and make this a lot more stressful than it is, right?
Don't start a fight.
Don't start a fight. Yeah. But dealing with your own emotions as it relates to this person and seeing things for what they are can be a very healing time, I would maintain. So that's part of the beauty that can happen when you're dealing with your parents in this way. Discipline. Let's just say, like, I'm talking to my mom about my kids, and she says, you have to have the patience with the kids and all this. Kind of like, yeah, Mom, I get that, but boy, I don't know. Did you feel very patient when I was young?
What about that time you snapped at me?
Right. Right across the fingernails. That hurt, Mom.
It was 1984.
Right.
October. No, just kidding.
You're right. 7:30 in the afternoon, more in the evening. So those conversations can be kind of neat. I don't know that I've had many of those. Have you?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
I can think of one example.
Yeah.
There was an issue with my mom years ago. We didn't speak for a while.
Yeah.
I remember bringing that up later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I remember bringing that up later because she had some questions as to, why are things a certain way? I'm like, well, because of this.
Right. And I think that can be very testy, very scary, very uncomfortable. But I think kind of doing it in a graceful way and in a kind way and a loving way. Say, yeah, this was my experience. This is what I experienced with that, and this is what I was worried about if I remember. I mean, it's been so long ago, Dad, but, these are things that I remember, and I'm curious what you remember about that. And honestly, you might really clear some things up that you never knew that each other was thinking. A lot of healing can go on at this time, I think I would maintain, if you're having those kind of kind conversations. But be careful about the anger and the resentments, and it can come out real bad too.
Right.
It can come out real bad. So, like you said, what'd you say? Don't cause a fight.
Yeah, don't start. Don't start none. Don't be none. That's what I always hear at work.
Don't start one, and what?
Don't start none. There won't be none.
Oh, there you go. This is honestly, with this back to this transference thing, though, this is honestly a very advanced emotional reality to understand about yourself that you really, if you're not paying attention, you'd never really know that it was going on. So, it's an opportunity to kind of increase that awareness. And the suggestion that I have a little bit is, stay present, just stay mindful so that things are, being dealt with our adult brain and not our kid brain. So essentially, like you said, Adam, you might not even realize that you're doing this, because your kid brain, your kid emotions, boom, they start popping, loudly, and you don't even realize that it's happening. So the idea that we want to be is mindful. We did a whole show on mindfulness and highlight, the idea of, staying present and seeing the behavior for what it is, which leads a lot to the healing, actually. I don't know if I said that well. Does that sound weird?
No.
No,
Understand.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's move on then. So self-care, yep. Talk about it all the time. Remember the definition? You're quizzed. What's the definition of self-care? Curious if you actually recall.
The actual definition.
Yeah, we talked about it.
I remember talking about it, and the video games came up.
Video
games, working out came up. Don't know the exact definition you gave, though.
Fun, relaxing, enjoyable activities that aren't self-destructive in any way and that aren't work-related tasks.
Okay.
Right? So that...
Unless you like work.
No, not even unless you like work. I'm glad you said that. Because
what if you really, really cannot wait to get up in the morning and go do work?
That's fine. Work is draining, and self-care is discharging time. It's very, very different because people will absolutely throw themselves into work. A good one is gardening. I like gardening. That's one of my self-care items.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I really got to go get the things on the tomato plants, actually, and weed it. So I'm looking forward to that. I enjoy that. The weeding is fun. Plowing the garden, planting the garden, getting all that stuff in, that's the work, right? That's draining. But watering it, turning on water, kind of checking out what's growing, seeing if I got new leaves on the thing, that's all very relaxing to me. You see
riding a lawnmower?
I love the riding lawnmower. That's the one chore I've never let my kids get into doing because that's relaxing time for me, right? But people will throw themselves into work and just work out problems by distracting themselves and wearing themselves out. It's not necessarily inherently bad, don't get me wrong. My father-in-law talks about this. This is the way he copes with stress. It can work. It could be effective, but it's not really self-care. We want to pull back and disregard all the things we're stressed out about and thinking about. Make a difference? Sound like a difference?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Learn to deal with the medical issues, right? You might have a lot of fear. We mentioned this. Part back again to the way that you're experiencing stuff. So deal directly with the medical issues and learn so that you don't have fear of what you don't know or understand about. My mom's had a lot of heart stuff, and I've had to Dr. Google comes in to help. There's a lot of research out there that you can get. I want people to be in the know. If your mom's beginning to get dementia, I've had to talk to my sister-in-law a lot. She had a mom that went through this. And there's pitfalls. You got to learn about, holy cow. I mean, basically, how do you feel if you don't know it about something that's happening directly in front of your eyes?
It stresses you out.
It's scary. It's terrifying. So just get knowledgeable. I think people generally kind of do that in the way that we live anymore nowadays. But along the same lines, it's kind of dealing with pre-grief. My father-in-law walking down the stairs, he struggles more. That freaks me out. So it's not that he's going to die anytime soon. He might be with us for 20 more years, and I hope so. But you begin to get in touch with you begin to...
You start thinking about it.
You start preparing.
Mm-hmm.
You start preparing, getting ready, managing your feelings about this. So, because it's real. I mean, we all... What is the phrase? We all have to pay taxes. There's a third one.
Mm-hmm.
We all die, we pay taxes, and what's the third one? Everyone has to do. I forget.
Why is I'm having trouble thinking of these, the things.
These
the
I
things.
know, right? The things.
Does the producer know?
Does the producer know? We'll come back to it if somebody gets it. Everyone has to pay taxes. There is a third. Death and taxes?
I don't think there is a third thing.
Maybe we have to Google that. Anyway, let's move on. Mindfulness. Cherish the time that we have is what you're learning. Begin to understand that time is very short. It's valuable. Focusing on the past, you miss the present. Focusing on the future just creates anxieties and fears. So we really, really, really want to get mindful, get in the moment, and stay where we're at. I have a thing that I feel like I've tried to do, whether I've been successful with it or not. But, at any given point, when I went to my high school graduation, Adam, I remember kind of just sitting back in a corner somewhere and just stopping. I just looked around, got by myself, got quiet, and just soaked in the experience of what was going on right there. And so as you go through this and kind of look at your parents in a different way as they're changing, soak it in. Be mindful about it. What's the phrase?
Birth, death, and taxes.
All right, we all are born, we all die, and we all pay taxes.
That's what one I'm seeing. I'm sure there's other ones too.
I think there's another one that I was thinking about, but I don't know. I think that has some comedy to it, actually. Anyway, okay. So here, include others. Do not be alone with this. That's probably something that comes up in a lot of suggestions throughout the process of dealing with stuff. Don't go it alone. Adam, what do you do when you are alone? Trick question.
I'm not sure I can say that on there.
You can say anything on the air. Get used to it. You're in podcast
relax.
It's the wild, wild west.
Tend not to drink. It's just kind of boring by yourself. Just relax, man. I like sitting outside on the back porch, just chilling out.
Can you be alone, or what?
For a little while.
Well, I'm thinking about if you're the only person that your mom knows, aren't you alone? It's a trick question, because you're not.
Okay.
Who can you be with?
You're talking about like siblings or...
Siblings, include them. Don't lock them out. They may not be as active as you are, but include them.
You also got to remember, though, they also have a choice, too.
They do.
Just like you do.
That's right. That's right. What about your friends?
Mm-hmm.
Can they not be a part of what you're experiencing with your parent, your dad, your mom? Right?
Absolutely.
They will listen. They'll deal with it. They'll be with you. They might even step in and help you. I mean, if you got good friends, they might take you. Hey, can I take your mom to the grocery store? I'm not asking you, Adam.
Sure you can, Chris.
No. But no, I mean, if you needed me to do something, we were talking about getting my kids to go cut some grass and stuff. And
right.
I know my older kid did actually a little bit with that.
Mm-hmm.
We were helpful. So I think the point here is you can feel very, very lonely, particularly as an only child. They said China, is the kids are expected to take care of their parents more. Like that's part of their culture because they've only had one kid.
Mm-hmm.
Incidentally, do y'all hear? China now has changed that rule. 2016. Your producer's holding up 3 fingers. I thought that they're allowed to have 3 kids now.
I think that's the new thing that they just released. Yeah, they went from the 1, and recently they're saying now they're up to 3.
Isn't that yeah? Yeah. For like 40 years, you were only allowed to have 1 kid in China, and now in 2016 they've changed that rule. Did you ever hear that?
Yeah, no, I haven't heard that. I'm trying to figure out how that's going to work for population control.
It's a weird thing. Well, now they're finding they don't have enough young people. It's like kind of they've overcooked it. You got a thought?
Well, I mean, this generation now, they're saying that they're waiting longer. They're actually, I saw a study that they're saying like the actual population actually is heading on a decline because a lot of the younger generation isn't having kids
and they don't want to.
Right, exactly.
The culture's changed.
So, and then also with, I bring up COVID, a lot of elderly people passed away because they were high risk. So this is like the first time in a long time that the generation trend is more downward. So there's a lot of concern about that. So yeah, talk about population growth. China wants to keep people. So they're saying, hey, let's have some more, let's keep us full.
I don't know. I'm just gonna stay off the cuff, man. I'm glad we don't live in a nation that like the government tells me how many kids I can have and tells me, oh, now you need
just
to
wait.
have more. No,
we're getting there.
More. Like, oh my God, oh, are we now?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna ask you to explain that one. We're just gonna move on. So anyway, okay. So your marriage partner might be, a helpful resource. However, respect their position, like you said with your siblings. They may, they may want that distance, and that's okay. But your friends, the caretaking role is a lot, and I just don't want people to feel like you're left alone. You might have your neighbors help out. If your mom's moved in with you, and then your neighbors need to be aware of that. They can be helpful. So just don't go it alone. That's a huge piece of dealing with this progression that's happened.
If you try to deal with it alone, you might be angry,
resentful, wore out, irritable. Absolutely. Maybe pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
Wildly angry. Coping with their anger, I mentioned as part of my brainstorm on how to cope with this. Listen, they are losing their independence. They are losing their abilities in some ways. They're feeling very shameful. They feel like they've been shamed. They may feel discarded, disregarded, not valued. Like, dude, if you're feeling like that, man, that is a terrible, terrible feeling, that you're kind of going through. So that's what you're seeing with their anger. There's a lot of resistance here from the elderly, and they're rebuking the fact that they're not any of those things. So realize that a lot of times when you're dealing with anger, it's fear. Reframe that, and you can be more reassuring and more comforting. This is the one where, letter I think I'm on. I can't stand the ideas. I know we make jokes like, man, I had to be the parent in the room when my parents were bickering again and fighting and squabbling and all that. Isn't it funny that we got to be the parent to our parent?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, leave those jokes. Those are fun. But leave out the idea that you're really thinking you have to be a parent to your parent when you're dealing with their aging and diminishing abilities in some ways. They're the parent still. You're the kid. And that's okay. You're an adult child. But, they're not childlike. They're not children. And so that's just another way that we insidiously and subconsciously go with, disrespecting their position and kind of where they're at with life. Does that make sense as far as, they're still the adult. They're not, you're the kid, they're the parent. Keep it that way and keep that respect there. Okay, I mentioned this too, I think, deal with expectations and boundaries, especially if they move in with you. Who's in charge if your dad moves in with you, Adam, at your house?
Me.
Right?
My house.
It's my house.
How many times have you ever heard someone say, my house, my rules?
Right? That's an expression. That doesn't change here, But I think there's kind of a natural question. Well, wait a minute. You're my dad, man. Am I going to be grounded? You're gonna but no, that sounds silly. But again, remember, we can move back to our kid brain like fast.
Mm-hmm. You may have to remind them it's your house.
Absolutely. This is the way we do things. And think about this. So you're married. They have had their family culture. You've had your family culture. And this is one of the things I think is cool about marriage. And I like to think about it with like Christmas traditions. Did you do all of your Christmas traditions with all of your kids from when you were a kid? No. You do some of yours, some of your spouses, you combine, and you create a new culture. Okay, so if that process goes on, and now your parents come and move in with you, whose family culture are we following?
Head household.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the mama and the dad who are living there. And that's a major adjustment. Now, that could be done kindly. You don't have to be, we don't eat on Sundays. We sleep in or whatever, and you have to be quiet. You're gracious. But the point here is there's a lot of angst that I do find with clients that are dealing with this. Mom moved in, and now she thinks she's like telling me how to rule the house and how we're supposed to do things and getting a lot of judgments here. I mean, it creates great distress out of them. I've had clients losing their mind dealing with these kind of stress points. So who's in charge? Oh, go ahead.
That's what I'm saying. Like, don't cut grass on Sundays.
Yeah.
I've heard that.
Who's in charge, right? That
Whoever's house it is.
It really is. That needs to be okay. It needs to be dealt with. Yeah, I love it. Your home, your rules.
Hopefully they don't have the mortgage on the house. Then it kind of gets
You get dicey. Dicey.
It's my house.
That's right. I bought it. Respect that they may struggle in asking for help. Gosh. Do you like asking for help?
No.
Right? Particularly when you're feeling in this weird stage of life, discarded, disregarded, unproductive, unwanted, depreciating abilities. I'm supposed to ask for help now when I've lost my independence, taken my driver's license away, and now I'm going to ask for help. Like, just get in their world a little bit and realize, like, dude, that is some hard things.
And they may be struggling with comprehending or accepting, I should say.
Cognitive delays are there.
Well, not just that, but I'm talking about they may be having trouble accepting that they need help.
Yes.
Think, I can still do it.
Well, I can still drive. Can't see for, 3 feet.
Mm-hmm.
But that cataract surgery might be a limitation. But, it's hard for them to identify that. Boy, I would not want to be a doctor having conversations regularly with older people taking their driver's license away. Like, that breaks my heart.
Right.
Because that's something I personally enjoy very much. Like, driving, it's a self-care item. I've taken drives before just to chill out and relax. To not be able to do that anymore.
Put the top down.
Top down, wheels up. That's right. Deep talk. Realize your parent is a different person than they were when you were small. I think I mentioned that before, right? It was an interesting thing. That was my brainstorming. There's an article here. I'll just list their points. In from betterhealthwhileaging.net, right? Help them with activities of daily living we talked about and instrumental activities of daily living. I never heard that expression. IDLs or whatever. Instrumental activities of daily living.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with that acronym either.
I really don't know what it is. 2, safety issues. I mentioned that. 3, medical and health issues. I think I mentioned that. Learn about them. Legal and financial issues I didn't mention at all. But those are very real and very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
What are the legal realities here? I just helped my mom and stepdad go over their living will, and it was like, wow, like that was very emotional. Sitting there and talking with them about what this means and what that means, and this kind of thing. It was like woo weird, Adam, very weird. But it's okay. I'm adjusting. I personally haven't dealt with a lot of these things yet. These are just on the horizon for us, I think, though. Housing issues, we kind of talk a lot about that, but quality of life and helping your older parent thrive. Let's support them. Let's encourage them. This is exciting. I value what you're doing, and let's thrive now. Planning ahead a little bit. Boy, what's that insurance you can get for elder care failing now?
I didn't know there was such a thing.
Yeah, there's long-term care insurance, I think is what it's called. Long-term care insurance. And if you have a parent who's like 50, 60 years old, like I don't know that you can get it in your 50s. When you start, hitting 60s, sometimes, particularly if you have family history of genetics with dementia and Alzheimer's and, and this type of thing. But even if the parent like has a stroke or something, if you don't have long-term care, long-term facilities will take every resource there is, and that's not even a drop in the bucket for what a lot of that stuff costs. So look into it. There is something called long-term insurance. I've had several clients that buy this. It's relatively affordable if you can get it at the right time of life. If you wait too long, my God, it's like exorbitantly expensive. But if you get it somewhere, I'm going to say in your 60s, dude, it absolutely pays for when you absolutely need care that a family member can't really provide. Because that's so they're big financial. I'm not smart enough to talk much more about it than that. But there are big financial concerns to maybe be prepared for. Managing relationships and family dynamics. And hey, they mentioned self-care too in in their article. So when your parents are getting older, is this a time to fear and stress about? Or is this a time to celebrate and be excited about?
Should be celebrate.
You know? So one of the things I thought, when we were talking about the culture thing, the African American families and all. You ever been to a funeral like that? I have not, but I've heard all about it. Dude, they are
An African American
and
funeral?
we're in the South. The Southern Baptist African American funerals. Man, they're a party.
Let me think.
They're dancing and drinking and celebrating, and I mean we call it a celebration of life down in the South, but for most funeral events, but. They're really getting down. I mean, they're partying. Not that we're celebrating, yay, mom's dying soon. But we're honoring and celebrating and really enjoying what they're investing into our life and allowing that to happen. I think it'd be a really beautiful time. Really healing time, a little, getting on the same page and spending a lot more time with these people because, they need your help. They need you to be around. Going grocery shopping with my mom. Hasn't happened yet, but might feel stressful. You really like being able to, at the end of their life, spend time with them. And I want people to feel good about that. However, we could be really stressed out about that if we're not coping with these things well. And I think that's maybe a little bit of the highlight of the show today, and realizing that these relationships are changing. I probably maybe should have said it, how do you cope with aging parents? Maybe how do we celebrate and how do we enjoy aging parents? That would have been a better title maybe, right? So we're about on the clock. We got to get out of here. Thoughts, questions, experiences. How do we go this way? How do we do the show?
I actually like what you just said about the title.
The title?
Yep.
I screwed the title up.
I don't know if I put it that way, but maybe it should have been, how do we celebrate aging parents?
I think we may do that.
I kind of like that.
I think that we're probably going to do that.
So it's going to be another episode.
No, it'll be the same episode. People's just going to listen to it and be confused about why we have a different title until the end of the show. We'll think about it. All right, hope this was helpful to you. Celebrate all your parents out there, not just on Mother's Day and Father's Day and all throughout the life cycle. Not sure where we're going next, but we will get back with you in about a week. Hope you guys have a great time, and we'll see you in about 7 days. Take care.